What's up, guys? Troy here. Today we are going to be talking about three theories around why people get bubble guts. I'm going to go through those, the truths, what's not true, and what my recommendations are to completely get rid of your bubble gut. Now, bubble guts are distension of the stomach even when you're lean. A bubble gut is when you have six pack abs and your stomach is protruding. There's no fat that is deposited subcutaneously, but instead there's a round turtle shell looking belly underneath. One theory why this happens is that bodybuilders are taking in too many calories, that these calories, the fiber, the protein, it's backing up their digestion and it's causing distension of the stomach. So they're trying to eat too much to gain the size, or even if they're losing weight, they still have to eat a lot of food to keep or maintain their size in a deficit. I would say this is very unlikely because your digestive villi, they're what absorbs nutrients after you've eaten a meal. They're little crypts in your stomach, microvilli, and they increase in size as you increase the amount of calories that you're eating. For example, when people are starving, such as in World War II concentration camps, when they leave the concentration camp, they cannot instantly eat a lot of calories because their microvilli in their intestines are so atrophied that they are unable to absorb the nutrients that are coming through. But when people eat more food or a regular amount of food, those microvilli grow and they're able to then digest and absorb the meal. So when a bodybuilder is increasing gradually their intake of food over time, these microvilli will increase in size to account for all the food that they're eating. In addition, digestive enzymes will also increase to accommodate for the amount of food these bodybuilders are eating. So if this was the fact, we would notice that there would be either leakage of protein in their urine, or there would be excessive undigested food in their feces, but we don't see this. There's been no anecdotal evidence of this either. And the other theory around this is that the pancreas is unable to keep up with the amount of food that they're eating, that the insulin is not able to keep up with the amount of food they're eating. In the case of a pro bodybuilder, they are not only consuming the food and letting their endogenous insulin do the work, they're taking exogenous insulin to put away those carbohydrates anyways. The insulin theory and pancreas theory is kind of null and void. In addition, those who have diabetes, they have greatly elevated levels of insulin, but they're still able to digest their food, even though some of these diabetics are eating 8, 9, 10,000 calories a day. What's more likely is that there's an insulin resistance that's built up over time. And this insulin resistance causes these bodybuilders to be in a state of hyperglycemia, meaning they have high blood glucose because their insulin receptors turn off after they're eating so many calories and they're abusing the growth hormone and they're abusing the insulin, that their insulin receptors, there's an on and off switch for the insulin receptors. And what happens when you're using growth hormone, it turns the switch off, and it means that your insulin receptors aren't pulling in the glucose like they used to be. There's no translocation of your GLUT1 and GLUT4. When you're using growth hormone, it's decreasing these insulin receptors and they're being turned off to the responsiveness to insulin, and thus your blood glucose just floats around in your blood and does nothing. And this is what's causing hyperglycemia in this state. The second theory is that there's an intestinal hypertrophy or hyperplasia. So the smooth muscle in the intestine increases in size, and this is what's accounting for the bubble gut. It's pushing against their stomach walls and it's causing that turtle shell looking stomach. If this was the case, if it was hypertrophy, yes, I would say this could be possible because, like I said, the microvilli are increasing in size to accommodate the increased calorie load that is needed. But when their body is in a calorie deficit, would this hypertrophy or hyperplasia cause a lot of distension in the stomach? And I would say probably not, because not most, but some pro bodybuilders are able to keep their gut in check and still have massive size to hang with everybody else. Why are only some people dealing with the issue of bubble guts and others are not? For example, Phil Heath at his biggest was still able to keep his stomach in check, but over the years, his stomach was protruding. There was some growth, it looked like, in his obliques. And if it was the case that he was unable to keep up with the food, why wouldn't he have noticed this earlier when he was trying to chase the size and gaining weight? Why do we only see it after he's gained all the weight, not while he was gaining size? The fourth reason is that there is a bacterial overgrowth in your small intestine. And this only happens when you're in a constant state of hyperglycemia. For those who don't know, when you're in a state of hyperglycemia, your stomach backs up and movement of food through your gastric system is severely inhibited. There is a crazy overgrowth of bacteria in your small intestine when nothing is moving. So these bodybuilders are shoving food in their face all the time. They're causing this constant state of hyperglycemia. And this is slowing down the movement of food. So they have all this food in their stomach, but it's going nowhere. And there's a bunch of bacteria feeding on it, which is pushing out. They're producing gas, which is pushing out the stomach and causing that turtle shell look. Now that we know what causes this bubble gut, how do we prevent or treat it after it's already happened? Well, a preventative measure obviously would be decreasing your growth hormone use. Through decreasing your growth hormone use, you're going to have a better control of your blood glucose because growth hormone directly increases glucagon secretion. Therefore, you're going to have a constantly elevated blood glucose when you're using exogenous growth hormone or even MK677 for that matter. Decreasing this will cause you to have a better control of your blood glucose. You'll have a normal blood glucose, and thus your gastric emptying will then normalize. The bacterial overgrowth over time will decrease in your small intestine. So your stomach will then come back to a normal state after we decrease its growth hormone. Now, another option would be you could lose weight. You could start eating less, and thus your microvilli and your stomach size and the amount of food you have in your stomach will decrease, but also your whole body will decrease. Now, a lot of these bodybuilders, they can't afford to stop eating. They can't afford to eat less because they're constantly trying to chase size. They're trying to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they constantly need to eat more. So perhaps in the off season or near the contest, could there be a time in which they could eat a lot less? Probably not, unfortunately. Let's say a bodybuilder is right at the competition or just a couple weeks away, and they know themselves and they know that they have a bubble gut. Common cases of bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine are treated with an antibiotic. So they use an antibiotic which kills the bacteria in the small intestine, which is then going to decrease the gas that is produced in the small intestine, and thus your stomach is going to be flatter if you need something like that as a last minute remedy for a bubble gut. Lastly, we could try to handle this on a mechanistic basis. Instead of losing weight, instead of decreasing our growth hormone, and instead of using antibiotics, we could try to normalize the blood glucose and thus normalize the bowel movements and stop the overgrowth of bacteria in the small intestine. Now, the insulin receptor can be turned on and off, and this is done through protein tyrosine phosphatases. For example, one of the major protein tyrosine phosphatases, PTP1B, is responsible for decreasing insulin sensitivity. So it turns off the insulin receptor, and thus it's going to decrease our ability to respond to insulin and cause higher blood glucose than normal. So when growth hormone is being used, insulin receptor is constantly being turned off. Now, if we inhibit PTP1B, then your insulin responsiveness and thus your blood glucose will normalize. There is one compound called MSI1436, and it is a PTP1B inhibitor. So it is able to turn off the PTP1B, and thus your insulin receptor is going to be more active and thus more able to pull blood glucose from your circulation, and thus you're going to have a normal blood glucose, and then there's no overgrowth in the stomach. Your insulin sensitivity is going to stay normal. You're going to have less insulin resistance, and overall, you're going to have a better experience with a flatter stomach and no bubble gut. And I wonder if any of these treatment measures have been undertaken by professional bodybuilders. For example, Rolly Winkler was able to get his huge bubble gut under control while maintaining his size. What did he do? Did he take antibiotics to get that bubble gut down to a normal level? Did he take a PTP1B inhibitor, or did he eat less or do some sort of fasting window before the show? So obviously some of these bodybuilders are able to decrease their bubble gut without decreasing their muscle size. Therefore, there must be a way to get rid of the bubble gut while also maintaining or gaining size. Now, I hope you guys like this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you think in the comments down below. Looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace.